I am incredibly excited to introduce our next speaker, someone who I have the incredible privilege of working with every single day, although he might not say the same thing. Please welcome to the stage the engine, the true engine behind this conference, Philip Manzano. I'm going to embarrass Phil for a second. When Phil isn't putting together amazing events like this one, serves as Keela's head of marketing and communications. He has years of experience working at local, regional, and national nonprofits. A leader, a thinker, a phenomenal human being, Philip was the recipient of the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal for his work with youth in Ontario. In 2011, Philip was named one of Canada's top 3 next young philanthropists by Rogers. Someone I get the privilege to call a dear friend. Phil will be chatting with us today about collecting and interpreting data in our nonprofits. Again, Philip Manzano.
Thank you, Najid. Your check is in the mail. Appreciate that. So, how is everybody doing? Awesome. Okay. The coffee break came at the right time. That energy is coming back. I like it. So, like Najid said, I am here to talk to you guys about data, about collecting data, and how I got to fun, right? Yeah, I know. I promise you it will be really good. And that's a theme that's actually been, that will continue throughout the day, that you're going to hear more about data, how we can use data and do things with it. But like Najid said, my day-to-day job, I'm telling stories, very much like Vanessa. I'm telling stories. That's what I love to do. I've worked at a lot of nonprofits, done a lot of things with nonprofits, but always in a storytelling capacity. And there's always been that underline to everything that I talk about. And by no means am I an expert with data. I'm not the person that's going to be lecturing and telling you everything and all the best practices that you need to do. That's not my role here. My role here is to facilitate these discussions and get you to start thinking about how you can tell even better stories and interpret your data in ways that you might not even be thinking about. I think one of the most exciting parts for me, on one hand as an organizer, but also as a speaker, is seeing how excited you guys were to connect and talk during that break. And that's what I hope to give you more opportunities to do. I want to give you more opportunities and more topics to talk about. And we'll start with collecting and interpreting data. I mean, so today, just a very high-level overview of what kinds of discussion starters we're going to be touching on. We're going to be talking about the importance of data. Obviously, we all know that data is important, and we need to be tracking it and doing things with it. But I'll dive into that and why it is really very important for nonprofits and for everybody in this room in whatever capacity, whatever role you have at your organization. Then we'll break off into some discussions at your tables. We want you to talk to one another, whether or not you're from the same org or not. We're going to start talking about how your nonprofit collects data, some of the things that you've done in the past, what has worked, what hasn't worked. Share those stories of being in the trenches, and hopefully we can really build one another's capacity and learn from that and learn from one another. After that, we'll dive into some examples of the stories that your data tells. Working with Keela, working with a bunch of nonprofits, I've been able to look at so many different forms of data, different sets of data, and really glean really interesting types of stories, interesting types of reports from them. And you can do so much from a single report that you might not be doing right now. So we're going to very quickly go over what those are and then talk about those, and hopefully those will give you some more ideas and more thought starters for you to take home and start on Monday morning and start thinking about your own data again. And then finally, we'll talk about practical steps to making data-driven decisions. That whole idea of making a data-driven decision and being that data-driven nonprofit is it can be scary, it can be a huge task if it's something that you're not currently thinking about, but it doesn't have to be. So that's kind of the sting that we want to take away from being a data-driven nonprofit, is that you can do it regardless of your size. I know that there's a varying amount of sizes of organizations within this room alone, but that just means that there's opportunities to learn, opportunities to really share stories and grow, and that's I think what we're hoping to do. So one of the things that always happens when I talk to my colleagues, when I talk to a lot of the nonprofits that I've worked with and things like that, is we end up talking about data, we end up talking about the things that we've collected as an organization, and the really interesting conversation comes when we think of this idea. If your data could speak, what story would it tell? Right? So undoubtedly, your data is telling a story. It's screaming something at you. There's something that is on the very high level that will be very obvious to you. But there's so many other things that are happening. There's so many other decisions that you can make based off of that data. And it's the idea that you want to become this data-driven nonprofit that makes data-driven decisions, right? It's more than just this buzzword. I know that all of us hear about data-driven decisions and being that data-driven nonprofit ever since, especially the book Data-Driven Nonprofits by Steve McLaughlin in 2016, I think. And one thing that we know for sure is that in order for nonprofits to continue to grow, they have to work smarter. They have to make smarter decisions. And it starts with that data. And it starts with what you collect, how you collect it, and actually doing something with it. Now, within this same book about the data-driven nonprofits and learning about how nonprofits can actually start to take on the personality of bigger for-profit organizations who always make their decisions based off of their data and the intel that they collect. One of the things that was found in their research is that only 3% of nonprofits in the US use any form of advanced analytics. That is a tiny amount, right? So this is, of course, in 2016, but when I look at that number, that 3%, to me, that just means that there is so much opportunity for growth. There's so much opportunity for the people in this room to level up their impact, to level up their game in terms of actually collecting data, actually doing something with it, right? And this sector, the sector that I love, that I've always been a part of. Ever since I graduated, I've been in the nonprofit sector because I love it. I love the people that are here. I love the people that are doing this work. And I feel like that's probably something that's underlying with everybody here. You are doing this work because you care about the impact that you're making. You care about what you are actually contributing to your clients, to the community, to society at large, right? That is your why, which Dr. Scott was talking about this morning. You have such a great advantage. You get to wake up and actually do something important. And that's why there's so much opportunity for growth within the nonprofit sector, but it means that we have to do better. We have to do good better. And I think that's why everyone's here. Everyone's here because they saw that there was an opportunity to learn, for professional development, for their organization to pick up something new, even if it's just one idea. Pick up something that can give them an advantage to do more good and have greater impact in the work that they're doing. And just to speak more about the level of growth that this sector is having, it is growing. It's booming, even though it's tough to get resources, and it's so hard to have these conversations where we're trying to gather more resources for ourselves and get more donors and all these things. A lot of people want to be a part of this sector. In fact, by the year 2026, the nonprofit sector will account for more than $200 billion in revenue and roughly 700,000 jobs. So there are so many people that want to be a part of this. There's so many people that want to do good in the society, and that to me is so exciting, right? And that should excite you as well, that there are people that care about the issues that you care about, and that there's opportunities to do amazing things. But that just underlines the fact that we have to be smart about it, right? We have to increase that 3% number to exponentially. We need everybody to start making these decisions based on data so that they can truly create the impact that they want. And data in and of itself, and having data and making those decisions based on data, it's great. Like we want organizations to do that. We want them to be smarter, and it'll make them more efficient, and all of those great things. And absolutely, those are amazing things that you need to start doing in order to stop your organization from burning out, to really take care of the people that are making that impact. But especially for the people in this room, there's a bigger issue when it comes to the proper collection of data. And that's, we're trying to make an impact. We're trying to move the needle in difficult situations. And without the right data, policy decisions are being made with a weaker, less evidence-based understanding of the sector. So the people who are in the decision-making seats that we're lobbying, that we're advocating to, they're operating on data that they rely on us to provide. So if we're not giving them the right things, if we're not constantly tooling them with the proper analytics and the proper stories, if we're not telling them what we need them to know, then they're going to be making these policy decisions based on what they have. And you don't know what that is, right? So we want to constantly be the voice that can shift that impact forward, and that starts with the collection of data, and that's why it's so important. I think that's why we want to have such an important conversation about that. And that's kind of just the starter of what we're going to be talking about. So in general, what I want to do is I want to talk about how we collect data, and then I want to go into some examples about exactly what you can do with some of the forms of data that you do have, and then dive deeper into how you actually make decisions based off of that data, because it's great to collect. We can do it, and in one way or another, all of us do collect data, and there's something more that we can do with it. So we'll dive into that a little bit more. But for now, what I'd like to do is for all of the groups, all the tables here, to start talking a little bit. And one of the questions that you can start talking about is this one. How does your organization currently collect data? So whether you're at the same organization or if you are making new friends at your table, I want you to share that. So maybe for the next 5 minutes, I'll go around, I'll listen in a little bit, but I want you guys to start talking and really share. How do you collect data at your org? So go for it. Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much for that. I apologize for cutting it short, but it does say discussion starter. So I want you to hold on to those ideas, and during our breaks, during the lunchtime, continue those conversations. That's exactly what we want. But I heard some really great ideas so far, and I'd like the room to hear what other people have been saying. So maybe we can get one person on this side to share, and maybe another on this side. Do we have any volunteers? About how you collected data? No? We were chatty a couple seconds ago. That's okay, no worries. Oh, we have one over here. Okay, perfect. Woo!
Thank you. Yeah, it was interesting on our table because I think we have some varying sizes in terms of, size of organization and also how long we've been around as organizations. So a lot of chat about the difference between starting from fresh and doing surveys and being personally in touch with people, and then also I'm in the same position as you, that we have moved all of our data that's been around for a very long time onto a new database and kind of sorting that or making it clean data and that kind of thing. So I think that's a good point is, just the different ways of doing that. So
awesome.
Yeah,
very much so. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, well, I think just even to touch on that point, I mean, there's different sizes of organizations, different types of capacity that you do have, but the underlying factor, and the one that I always want to underline when it comes to collection of data, it's use something, anything. It doesn't matter what it is, it doesn't matter what system you have, it doesn't matter if it's pen and paper, do something, right? One of the things that we always say in our office is the best CRM is the one that you use, that you actually use, right? So it doesn't matter if it's the most fancy, most expensive one or the cheapest one, right? As long as you're using it, that's how you're getting value from it, right? But it's not just using what you have. It's not just using the tools. It's using it properly. And something I always like to talk about is like owning a copy of Microsoft Word doesn't guarantee that you're going to create a best-selling novel, right? Mere possession of something means nothing. It means you have to use it properly. You have to, like, if you are going to invest in a tool, learn how to use it properly to its most effective state. Talk to the people that are supporting you so that they can actually, so you can get the most out of those tools and actually do something positive with it. I think that's the most important part there. So do something with it. So I do want to talk about interpreting data and the types of stories that different data sets can tell. And being a part of a company that works with nonprofits all the time, we get to see all sorts of data, and we learn about how organizations use software and learn how they collect data, and we like to help, and we try to create stories and opportunities for them to do more with data. So some of the more popular ones that we've seen fall in the donor data and also volunteer data. So I'll run through some really high-level examples of the stories that you could tell from those, and then hopefully those will spark some more discussion topics later on. So obviously, donor data can tell us a lot. Every report is different, but it does tell you a lot. So one of the things that I like to do is, talking about lapsed donors, for example. That's a story that is really important to a lot of organizations. I'd say every organization, and the very high level story that it does tell is someone gave to us before, but they're not giving to us now. You could stop there, and it would be a valid story, but there's so much more there, right? So other questions that you could ask is, who stopped giving? Why did they stop giving? Was there something else happening at the time that they stopped that may have made them stop giving, right? All of these questions are stories given from that same report, right? So it's about being critical. It's about asking questions about the data and not just staying there, right? It's doing something more with it. Another popular one is major donors. I'm sure there's a lot of people here that either have a major gifts program or are hoping to create one. Well, one of the reports that you can have are, who are our major donors, right? So obviously, that's the high-level report. These are the people that gave X amount of dollars to our organization. They're our major donors. Let's steward them, right? But this report tells you something else. Who isn't a major donor? Who's ready to become one, right? You can look at donor history, and you can find out people who have historically given close to that amount, and maybe they're primed for an ask. Maybe they're ready to be stewarded into becoming a major donor, right? So there's so many more things that you can dive into, and it's about asking those questions and trying to have the courage to actually make a change in what you're doing and act on the data that's presented. Third one is recurring donors. So this kind of speaks to the full picture of your donor's contribution. So let's say that you pulled a report or you gathered your data and made a list of all the donors who donated $200 to your organization. So you'll have a list of those people, but that might not include the list that in that list, you might not include the person who donated $50 more times. So their contribution, although that one-time donation was only $50, might be more than the $200 in general that's represented on your list. See that? So it gives you a better idea of what that full donor picture looks like. So even data, even numbers that you pull based on the parameters of your search or your query can really change what you're looking at. So you have to be smart about how you do it. And that goes, again, to leaning on the support that you have. If you have a system, they have support. They can help you use your system to the most effective way possible. And there's so many resources that are free, that are available, that you can learn. Google is great for this as well, right? So you can do so much and learn so much about how you can take more from your donor data. But of course, this is 3 examples. There are hundreds upon hundreds more stories that you could tell just based on the simple reports that you're probably already doing, the reports that you're probably already running. So be critical about those and start asking those questions. Similarly, volunteer data can tell us a lot. So again, these reports tell us a lot of different stories as well. The total volunteers that you have. So how many people are engaging with us, and is there room to grow that engagement? For a lot of orgs, reporting this kind of story is so important, especially when it comes to applying for funding, applying for grants, and talking about what resonates with your base of clients or your base of donors, right? Volunteer data can really tell you that. People can donate their treasure, and that's such an amazing, selfless thing to do. But when people donate their time, they're donating their skills, their passion, and they're donating so much, and they're so heavily invested in what you're doing, right? It takes a lot of time to, out of your own life, out of your own work, to go and volunteer for something. So it really does say so much about that organization and the individual that's actually a part of it. So there's so many ways that you can go with that. Another one is total hours. So how many hours have people put in? And does this actually accurately show how much people care? Like, if I had a program that a lot of people were volunteering in, does that mean that this program is the one that is the most popular, that people actually want to give money to, they want to engage in more, right? These are some of the discussion starters that you can have as a team when you start noticing that, this program has a lot more volunteers in it, has a lot more hours put into it, and it can even speak to the conversation of where you're putting your resources, right? So if you have an organization or if you have a program that a lot of people are volunteering to, maybe that's something that you want to push more resources to. and have that high-level conversation with people who are controlling the money in the organization and talking about the programs that are in place. Maybe this is somewhere where you want to have more resources and actually focus a bit more on. And again, popular cause areas. Do our programs resonate with people, and which programs don't? I always find that the question of which programs don't is something that is really valuable for you to ask, because we are all struggling in terms of our resources, in terms of our capacity. We're always strapped, and we're trying to do so much more with little, right? So we want to make sure that we're efficient with the things that we do have. So if there's something that isn't performing, ask questions about why. Ask questions about what we can do to make sure it does perform, and even have the courage to be like, you know what, we have to cut ties with this and put our focus on something else. And it's a tough discussion to have, but it's one worth having, because it really does help to push your impact forward, and it helps your organization to really focus the resources where it's needed most. So those are really high-level examples of the stories that you can tell, and obviously there's so many more, and hopefully this kind of starts some ideas for your table to start thinking about. And obviously I'm going to be around all day, that you can pick my brain about the different types of stories that we've been telling and we've been seeing as well, and how you can approach them, and other stories that you can pull out of it. But the more important part of it is, once we do pull those stories out, how do we actually act on it? And I think that's kind of a tough thing that especially smaller nonprofits struggle with. So how do we actually make data-driven decisions? And that's a question that a lot of nonprofits can ask themselves, especially if they're smaller, because it's a bit tough. So one of the things that I found is that you should ask questions about your data and be critical about it. So don't just blindly report. Be critical and ask questions. And these 3 questions have really helped to guide me and helped a lot of the nonprofits that I've been a part of. So the first one is, does this data tell the full story? Going back to that recurring donor report that I was talking about, it might tell one piece of the story, but does it tell the whole story? Can I really make a decision for my nonprofit based on this one bit of information? Ask that question. Second, is this data meaningful? Does it actually mean that I have to make a change? And does it actually resonate with what I'm trying to do? So ask that question. So data. So one of the great things I love about the nonprofit sector, things can be going wrong, but you guys were just talking about what was happening, and like you were engaged. I love that. I love this sector. I love the people here. That's amazing. So I'll wrap up. So the last question that you should always ask about your data is, what can we measure and analyze to get more meaningful results? There's always more that you can glean from the reports that you pull. There's always more information that you can get out of it. And it's important to actually ask those questions. So those are 3 really important questions that you should always ask about yourself, but about your data. So when it comes to actually doing something with that data and coming to that point where I need to make a decision, should I actually make a change based on the data that was given to me? And it's a tough decision to make. And one of the ways that I've always used is kind of this graph that kind of illustrates it. And like most graphs, where you want to be is up and to the right in this area. So this kind of marks out the confidence in the relationship that you have with the data, and then the benefits and risks of that data. So where you want to be is all the way on the right side of it is that the benefits of making a change actually outweighs the risk of making that change. And then you want to be at the top where the correlation of that data to what hypothesis you have actually is strong. Which wraps me up to my last point. Yes. So we made it. Okay, guys. So I just want to wrap up with the last big idea, which is basically the one that underlines this entire talk. And again, this is a talk that is supposed to be a discussion starter for the rest of the day. And it's that when you interpret your data correctly and tell the right stories, you can make a bigger impact. There are so many different stories that lie within the data that you already collect. So ask those critical questions, do more with that data, and you'll be able to create such a wave of impact within your organization. And I hope that's something that you can start doing. So again, I'd like to thank you so much for your patience through all of that, and you guys were absolutely amazing. Thank you so much. I'll be around if you have any questions. Thank you.